I exposed my wife's cheating with the district attorney and revealed our daughter's true father while turning her betrayal into ruthless revenge. I was sitting in my office late on a Friday night, staring at the framed photograph on my desk. It showed me, the ever-stoic regional manager for a chemical company, alongside my wife Grace and our 3 children, back when they still believed I was a decent man. Now, under the warmth of fluorescent light, everything around me felt dark and ironic. I'd been sifting through resumes for 2 new office staff to replace the women whose husbands recently got promotions. It would have been routine and unremarkable had my personal life not started melting down, or rather, had I not set it ablaze in my own quiet way. I knew which resumes were best, but messing with people's lives had become a hidden thrill for me. I was deep into this reading when my executive assistant Kathy tapped on my door. "Ed," she said, "all 8 people have confirmed their Monday interviews. Is there anything else you need?" I lifted my head and gave her my most benign fatherly smile, a mask I'd perfected over the years. "That'll be all. Good night," I murmured. She seemed relieved, as though my presence radiated some intangible darkness. Once she was gone, I exhaled. Every Thursday, I traveled to a different state in our region, meeting with our sales reps for half the day on Friday, then returning home. Because of that, my wife Grace enjoyed her girls' night out every Thursday. For the past 15 years, we had a comfortable, or so it seemed, arrangement. I was free to roam the open highways and feed my ego in the quiet of my sedan, and Grace could keep the house exactly as she wanted, do as she pleased and amuse herself. However, I always claimed these hours alone were invaluable thinking time. Actually, I relished the sense of control. My vantage point behind the wheel, away from them, made me feel untouchable, hidden in plain sight. Grace was an executive assistant in the district attorney's office, though she'd soon be moving to a federal position. She was a smart woman, perhaps too smart for her own good, beautiful, blonde, with a figure that made men stare. In the early years, she made me feel worthy just by letting me stand next to her, but after 2 decades of marriage, I no longer felt awe. I felt the urge to orchestrate events from behind the scenes, to test how far I could push people before they broke. When Grace's parents began taking our 3 kids every second weekend, they said it was to give us time to reconnect. We pretended it saved our marriage, but in truth, I liked having those child-free weekends to indulge in my own cunning. The older I got, the more I realized I thrived on controlling outcomes. That Friday, I got home late. Grace was in the kitchen, wearing an elegant blouse and sipping tea. She barely looked at me. "You done with those interviews?" she asked without warmth. "We really need some stable staff, or else the entire office environment will crumble." "Yes, I'm done." "Monday, bright and early," I said, feeling a flicker of irritation at her dismissive tone. I watched her for a moment. In that instant, she looked like a cat haughtily surveying a mouse, except I was no mouse. We had taken a weekend family trip to the Grand Ole Opry, orchestrated by Grace as one of her attempts to maintain normalcy or to keep up appearances. On the return drive, we stopped at this restaurant, Lambert's, famous for flinging giant bread rolls across the room. The kids thought it was hilarious. I, on the other hand, considered the place overrated. Overcooked food, cramped wooden booths, and too many loud tourists. Grace turned off the music in the SUV. That was my cue. She wanted a serious conversation. Feeling that subtle surge of excitement at conflict, I reached into my jacket pocket and switched on a small recorder. She didn't see my hand move. I'd grown adept at documenting everything. "What's on your mind?" I asked, feigning warmth. Her face was set. "Ed," she said quietly, "have you ever thought about having an affair? I mean, truly considered it." The question was so brazen it startled even me. Still, I kept my composure. "And why would you wonder that?" I asked slowly. She stared at the road ahead, her jaw tight. "Because sometimes I feel we're stuck. Our vows, they don't mean what they did. Society's changed. Maybe stepping outside would help clear the air." My mind whirled with possibilities. Is she testing me? The honest truth, I had considered it, but I'd never acted on it. Actually stepping out might disrupt the carefully curated life I manipulated from behind the scenes. And, ironically, I suspected Grace might have her own secrets. I simply suspected them, but had never caught anything. I gave a pensive nod, as though pondering deep moral truths. "Well, I appreciate your honesty," I said, "but no, I've never gone that far. I respect the concept of fidelity." My tone was intentionally self-righteous. I wanted her to feel petty, as though I was the morally superior spouse. Grace's nostrils flared. She was silent for several miles. Then, almost in a monotone, she said, "I think you should do it. In fact, I'd give you my blessing if that's what would make you happy." I forced an airy laugh. "Grace, what's changed?" Last I checked, you valued integrity. She clenched the steering wheel. Things change. People grow bored. And maybe I'm bored enough to try something radical. I looked out the window. So, she wants me to slip up so she can justify something. The power dynamic in my mind shifted. I need to watch her more carefully. We rode the next hour in tense silence. Twice, she flicked off the radio and seemed ready to speak, but then reconsidered. Eventually, she blamed her bizarre suggestion on reading too many romance novels. That was the first glaring lie. Grace despised those novels. We arrived home and found my parents there with our 3 kids. My father cornered me outside near the trunk of the car. "Ed," he murmured, "I need to talk to you privately. Your mother and I discovered something about Grace and April. Your wife's watching. When's a good time to speak?" I casually shrugged. "Tomorrow at the office," I said with forced cheer, loud enough for Grace to hear. "I'll help you fix that cabinet or whatever." He nodded and walked away. Grace was standing by the open front door, arms folded. Her blue eyes were cold, suspicious. "Going somewhere tomorrow?" she asked. I forced a grin. "You heard me. Dad's got a small job for me. I'll be home a bit late, but we'll manage dinner." She gave a tight smile. "Fine," she said, stepping aside to let me in. There was tension in the air. Our children, Amy, our oldest, Eric, our son, and April, our youngest, were oblivious, sitting in the living room exchanging stories with my mother. I realized I was starting to enjoy the sense of looming confrontation. She's up to something, and so am I. The next morning, my parents came to my office. We locked the door. Kathy brought coffee, then left us in peace. My father cleared his throat. "Ed, I'm so sorry. Remember that silly joke I did a few months ago, buying those DNA test kits for the grandchildren, submitting them to Ancestry.com? I tensed. "Sure, I remember." He exhaled. "We got a match for April. A woman named Beatrice Smith claims she's the girl's grandmother. She wants to find her son, April's biological father, and connect with his descendants." My heart pounded. "This can't be right," I murmured, my mind spinning. Or maybe it could be right if Grace was stepping out or if she had some old secret. "Let's call this woman," I said. "We'll figure it out." I put the phone on speaker, pressed record, and dialed the number. After 2 rings, a raspy female voice answered. "This is Beatrice Smith," she said. "How can I help you?" "Ma'am, my name is Edward Adams. I was informed you found a DNA link with my 16-year-old daughter, April. It says here you might be her paternal grandmother." Her voice grew somber. "That's correct. I gave up my only child for adoption when I was 15. His adoptive name was Luke Barrow. My genealogical results show April might be his daughter. Are you familiar with him?" I felt my stomach twist. "Luke Barrow, district attorney, my wife's boss." "Yes," I whispered. "I know him quite well." Beatrice coughed. "I'm dying of lung cancer, stage 4. I'd like to meet my granddaughter before I pass." I swallowed, fighting a surge of vindictive excitement. So Grace has been cheating with Luke all this time. This was bigger than I'd hoped. "We'll arrange a visit," I said, leveling my tone to appear cooperative. "I'll let my parents drive April to you on a weekend. I can't spare the time with work, but they're more flexible." "That's fine, dear," Beatrice sighed. "Send me a notarized statement so my attorney can do a DNA test. A large inheritance is at stake." We ended the call. My father sat there, eyes bulging in disbelief. My mother sniffled, tears in the corners of her eyes. I simply stared at the phone. "Grace. Oh, Grace, you're not just cheating. You had a child with him." "Ed," my father whispered, "this is monstrous. Does Grace know?" I rubbed my chin. She might, or maybe she suspects Luke could be April's father. Either way, I'm about to find out. Outside, I handed the recorder to Kathy. "Transcribe everything. Make copies. I'll need them. We're heading toward a divorce, so keep this quiet." Her eyes widened, but she nodded. "Yes, sir." Soon after, I pulled David, my assistant manager, and his wife Cheryl into my office. Cheryl had grown up near Grace. They'd never been close friends, but they knew each other well. I needed them to help me dig deeper. "Listen," I said, shutting the door. "I suspect Grace and Luke have been together for years, maybe even from before April's birth. I want proof." David frowned. "You sure, Ed? That's your wife." I gave him a tight-lipped smile. "My wife's the one who suggested I cheat on her out of nowhere. Something's off. I suspect she wants to catch me in an affair so she can get a divorce that favors her. If she can paint me as the adulterer, she wins it all." Cheryl's gaze hardened. "That's manipulative. But Grace can be arrogant. She thrives on pushing people around. I remember how she talked down to everyone in school." "Yes," I said with a small nod, "and I'm done tolerating it. David, you'll take the company car for the next 3 months on Thursday nights. Go to the States in my place." "Cheryl," I need to borrow your personal car. I'll drive it so no one will suspect it's me on the roads. Grace must believe I'm still traveling. She'll keep doing what she's always done on Thursdays, and I can follow her unseen. Cheryl leaned forward. If you catch her in the act, call me. I'll have the dispatcher send the cops on a fake emergency call. That'll humiliate them. Some of the officers despise Luke for his harsh sentencing. I let out a quiet laugh. Perfect. My mind whirled. I realized how exhilarating it felt to weave these threads like a spider building a trap in the shadows. I arranged everything. I had the alarm code to Luke's house, courtesy of an old contact, Dale Britton, a former colleague of Luke's who'd left the DA's office to start his own practice. Dale had a bone to pick with Luke on Thursday. I followed Grace in Cheryl's worn-out Ford Taurus. She drove her fancy SUV to Charlie's Bar and Grill. Luke arrived, wearing an expensive suit, and they ate steak, sipping wine as though they were celebrating. I parked discreetly, capturing glimpses through tinted windows. They left separately. She headed to Luke's house. I saw her punch in an alarm code on the side panel and slip inside with her own key. 10 minutes later, Luke arrived. From a neighbor's house, a man whose son had been locked away for years by Luke's iron-fisted prosecution. My hired associates used hidden cameras and microphones. The old neighbor despised Luke enough to let me do whatever I wanted. I watched the feed on my phone. The cameras in Luke's living room captured Grace in a half-open blouse, no bra. He kissed her, hands all over her, pushing her up against the wall. She moaned. I caught flickers of her arrogant grin. Even in lust, she had that condescending tilt to her head, as if awarding him a precious gift. The feed went no further, as I told the guys to keep it suggestive but not hardcore. I wanted enough humiliating proof without stepping over legal lines. My phone buzzed. Cheryl texted, "They've hired a prostitute to approach you tonight. They want to film you cheating." I smirked. Fools. I wasn't about to let them sabotage me. David, behind the wheel of the company car, feigned a breakdown on a deserted road and called a tow truck. Meanwhile, I snuck onto Luke's driveway and removed the valves from his tires to keep them stranded. Then I made my call. 2 uniformed officers who loathed Luke arrived at his doorstep with lights flashing. They pounded on the door. Luke opened it, shirtless, hair disheveled, while Grace appeared behind him, clutching a bedsheet around her chest. "Mrs. Grace Adams," barked one officer. "There's been a serious car accident in Arkansas involving your husband, Edward. We were asked to locate you. Your parents suggested you might be here." Grace's knuckles whitened around the sheet. "This is not, I was visiting a friend." Luke tried to block the cop's view. "She's leaving anyway. You can go." They gave each other forced, awkward smiles. "You two have a good night," said the officer, turning around with a theatrical sweep of his flashlight. I filmed everything from my vantage point. Perfect. They were terrified, half naked in that doorway, with the whole fiasco streamed to a private Facebook group. The humiliation alone was priceless. That night, Grace tried to come home, but I'd changed the locks. I also had a restraining order in place, courtesy of Dale's connections in the legal system. She got as far as the front yard, discovered she couldn't get inside, and started pounding on the door. I watched from an upstairs window with the lights off. She called our oldest daughter, Amy, who was confused and worried. Eventually, a patrol car rolled by and told Grace she'd be violating a court order by stepping onto the property. She left, fuming. At dawn, I was in the kitchen with Amy, Eric, and April, flipping channels. Suddenly, the local station blasted a sensational news alert. District Attorney Luke Barrow and Mrs. Grace Adams were streamed live on social media last night. Sources say they plotted to set up her husband, Ed Adams, with a prostitute to gain advantage in a divorce. The footage also reveals a scandalous affair that's been going on for years. My children stared wide-eyed at the screen as footage of their mother's silhouette in a white bedsheet flickered across. A reporter's voiceover explained how they'd planned to ruin me, how the prostitute idea flopped, and how the police had paid them a late-night visit. My 16-year-old daughter, April, suddenly understood. "So, does that mean she's not just a cheater? She did all this behind your back?" I nodded slowly, schooling my features into fatherly sadness, though inside I was thrilled at how thoroughly I'd orchestrated it. "Your mother made her choices," I said, then paused. "April, there's more. You're going to meet your grandmother, Luke's mother. She's gravely ill." April's face twisted in confusion. Amy and Eric just stared, stunned. "Mom always told us we were all your kids," Eric muttered, his voice shaking. I gently patted his shoulder. Yes, she is a liar, I thought, but I said nothing aloud. That weekend, extended family poured in to show support for me and the kids. Even Grace's father, my father-in-law, sat with me on the back patio, sharing a cold beer. He looked miserable. "Edward, I'm sorry." I never believed my daughter capable of such arrogance. She always thought the world revolved around her, but I never imagined it would come to this. He sighed. I don't blame you for shutting her out. I've barely spoken to her since the news broke. I gave a sympathetic nod. Inside I was smug, reveling in how thoroughly I'd turned even her own parents against her. I didn't want it to be this way, I lied. But she left me no choice. Grace's mother, Kay, glared at a photograph of Grace on our living room wall. I always told her, respect what you have before it's gone. She's so full of pride. This time, she's gone too far. My father-in-law sighed. We're changing our will. What should have been Grace's inheritance will go to your 3 children, Ed. My own daughter is a stranger to me now. From across the room, I noticed Amy staring, tears glinting in her eyes. The atmosphere was so thick with condemnation that I almost felt sorry for Grace. Almost. Meanwhile, April traveled with my parents to meet Beatrice Smith in a neighboring state. While they were away, I received a phone call from my father. Ed, this woman, Beatrice, she's unusual. Stage 4 lung cancer, but she has energy. She told us how Luke's father ended up in prison for murdering his mistress's husband. The man was violent, and apparently Luke inherited a harsh streak. She loves April. They connected instantly. She wants to finalize the inheritance and name April as primary beneficiary. You're to be the trustee until April's 25. Really? I said, controlling my tone. That's generous. He continued. She also insisted on a DNA test to confirm April's paternity. The results are conclusive. Luke is definitely April's father. There's no question now. I feigned shock. I see. Let's keep that quiet until after the dust settles. All right, he murmured. We hung up. I rubbed my temples, a faint grin tugging at my lips. Poor Grace. All her secrets unraveling at once. While my kids were reeling from the scandal, Grace's carefully curated world was burning. She'd gone shopping for new clothes. She always liked expensive brands, but the store manager refused to let her use the staff discount she'd sometimes enjoyed. Another shopper hissed, "You should have known you'd wind up disgraced. 5 hours on Facebook Live hooking up with your boss. Despicable." Grace was humiliated, left fuming. She crawled back to Luke's house in the early afternoon. The security company had come by, changed the codes, and left a note about resetting everything. She realized belatedly that they'd mistaken her for Luke's wife. That stung. She rummaged through the mail and found the divorce petition I had filed. My claims included fraud. She'd concealed April's true paternity, emotional abandonment, adultery, and defamation. I demanded significant damages. If the court agreed, she and Luke would be financially obliterated. She opened a letter I'd sent, reading with trembling hands. Grace, you tried to set me up to divorce me, thinking I'm so gullible that I'd cheat at your suggestion. You blame me for all you lack in life, as though I forced you into a loveless marriage. If you hate me so much, why stay married for so long? Because your precious Luke didn't want the burden of raising children, even his own. So, you lived a tangled lie, humiliating me behind my back for years. You ridiculed me as a clueless fool, an easy target for your manipulations. Our children heard your sneers. The children now see the truth. You turned them into pawns in your twisted chess game with Luke. Society sees it too. When you look around for allies, you'll find only the ghosts of your delusions. Keep laughing with Luke if you must. Toast your victory or face the reality you've created. Ed. She reportedly sobbed uncontrollably after reading it, but I was in no mood for sympathy. 3 days later, Grace mustered the nerve to return to the family house to retrieve clothes and personal items. I anticipated she might show up unexpectedly, so I arranged another humiliating scene. That evening, I sat in my living room, phone in hand, with Eric and Amy in the kitchen. We heard a car on the gravel driveway, the front door handle rattled, then loud knocking. "Open up!" Grace's voice carried. "I need to get my things." I rose, motioning for Eric to stay put. April was still away, thankfully, so she wouldn't witness the chaos. I pulled out my phone and dialed dispatch. "She's here," I murmured. "We have a restraining order. You know what to do." "Yes, sir. Officers inbound," they replied. I opened the door an inch, chain still on. Grace glared at me through the gap, looking so damn sure of herself. "Ed, let me in or I'll break a window." I gave her a cold stare. "You're not allowed within 500 feet of me or the children. That includes the house, Grace." She slammed her palm against the door. We both know that was a rushed restraining order. "Let me in." "I'm still part owner of this property." I smirked. "Not for long. Now step back before you make this worse." Just then, 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing in a swirl of blue and red. Officers jumped out, shouting commands. Grace spun around, blinking in confusion. "What is this?" she snapped. "You can't keep me from my own home." One officer approached. "Mrs. Adams, you were served a court order. You are in violation by being here. We must ask you to leave." Grace's face contorted with fury. "That is my house, my children. He's the manipulative bastard, not me. Don't you get it? All of you have it backward." "Ma'am, calm down," barked the officer. "Failure to comply will result in arrest." "I want my clothes," she shouted, her voice cracking, posture defiant yet desperate. I stood in the doorway, letting the scene play out, savoring every second. "Officers," I said, sounding magnanimous, "I'll allow her to pick up a small suitcase from the porch if you stand by. She's not stepping inside." Grace's eyes flashed with rage, but she nodded stiffly. "Fine, suitcase. Then I'm out of here." I closed the door, walked upstairs, grabbed the battered blue suitcase from our closet, stuffed it with some of her cheap sweatpants, an old t-shirt, and random toiletries. Nothing fancy. Then I lugged it onto the porch and set it down at her feet. "This should hold you," I said. She eyed me as though I was a demon. "You really enjoy hurting me, don't you?" she hissed. I cocked my head. "No, Grace. I only enjoy exposing the truth." Tears pooled in her eyes, but pride kept them from falling. She seized the suitcase and turned away. The police escorted her back to her car, and I retreated inside. Behind me, Amy watched wide-eyed from the hallway. I closed the door, locked it, and exhaled. My heart pounded with the thrill of orchestrated vengeance. 2 days later, Grace's parents tried to arrange a meeting at a neutral coffee shop to speak with her about the fiasco. I learned of it when my father-in-law called to warn me. "Ed, we're going to see Grace for the first time since all this exploded. She's insisting we meet. We want to see if she shows remorse or at least some sense of reality." I had a different idea. I quietly tipped off the local news so a reporter might catch them in public, adding more pressure to Grace's meltdown. They met at Beans and Roasts, a small cafe near the courthouse, during a midday lull with hardly any customers inside. Grace arrived in dark sunglasses, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her father and mother were seated at a table near the front window. The moment she sat, her father said, "Grace, we are disgusted by what you've done. Have you any explanation for the pain you've caused this family? Your children are traumatized." She lowered her shades, her face stony. "Don't pretend you're all squeaky clean. You were the ones who insisted on taking my kids every other weekend. Maybe if you'd left them with me, I'd have had fewer opportunities to slip away. Ever think of that?" Her mother's mouth fell open. "How dare you blame us for your sneaking around? You had a decent home with Ed. You had children who loved you. You threw it all away for Luke, that worthless man, just so you could keep living like some arrogant queen who answers to no one." Grace's jaw clenched. "Oh, you know nothing. You've been singing Ed's praises for years. He's not the gentle father he pretends to be. He's manipulative and controlling behind the scenes, and all of you are blind. He set me up." Her father slapped the table, rattling their cups. "Then you shouldn't have fallen for it. If you had any integrity, there would be nothing to catch you in. Don't blame him for what you did with Luke. Did Ed force you to spread your legs for that man?" Grace's cheeks burned. 2 older women at the next table gasped audibly at his crude remark. Grace's mother added, "We saw the footage, Grace. You practically flaunted it. There's no going back now." Grace glared at them, tears forming. "I see whose side you've chosen. I never wanted it to go this far, but Ed, he's behind so many of these traps. I was only making sure I'd leave the marriage on my terms, but now everything's twisted in his favor." Her father stood. "We're done here. I can't believe you turned into someone so selfish. Don't bother calling unless you intend to apologize to your children." He and her mother walked out. Grace sat stunned. The tiny cafe buzzed with whispers, while a local news freelancer captured the last snippet on camera. Mortification was etched on Grace's face. She tore off the sunglasses, tossed them aside, and stormed out. A week later, April came home from her grandmother Beatrice's place. She'd grown quieter, more thoughtful. My mother and father accompanied her. The moment April stepped inside, she rushed into my arms. I let a flicker of genuine warmth slip through, forgetting for a moment my manipulative side. "How was your visit?" I asked. She explained how Beatrice was kind and honest about Luke's violent ancestry. She also told April that none of this was April's fault. "We had some good talks," April murmured. She told me never to let other people's sins define me. I patted her back, feigning paternal calm. "I'm glad," I said. That night, April confronted me in private. "Dad, I know you must hate Mom for what she did, but I also sense you've been pushing all the right buttons to tear her down. I can't say I feel sorry for her, but part of me is scared. You're my father, but sometimes you scare me too." I arched an eyebrow. "Do you think I'm unfair after all she's done?" She shrugged. I think you enjoy controlling every piece of this puzzle. Her eyes, so like Grace's but lacking the malice, bored into mine. Caught off guard, I forced a gentle chuckle. I'm just protecting what's left of our family. She hesitated, then nodded, heading off to bed. The last glimmer in her eyes told me she wasn't fully convinced, but it didn't matter. What she believed wouldn't stop the lawsuits or the unstoppable wave of condemnation now drowning Grace. 2 months later, all my legal claims against Grace and Luke took shape: fraud, emotional abandonment, passing off Luke's child, April, as mine, and damages for the mental torment inflicted on me and the kids. I'd hired the best attorney in town, Dale Britton, Luke's old colleague who despised him. Perfect synergy. Behind the scenes, Dale revealed a chilling personal motivation. Luke blocked me from a major case years ago, cost me a fortune in legal fees. Now I can make him pay, he said with a grin. And your dear wife, Grace, made it easy by forging paternity documents for the hospital. She's toast. I stared at Dale. She actually forged documents? He nodded vigorously. I have a contact who retrieved April's birth records. Luke's name was hidden behind sealed adoption-like forms. No typical father's signature. Grace manipulated the system to make you appear the father. That's intentional fraud. Amid these discoveries, I recalled the hidden camera footage. Grace pressing Luke against the hallway wall in his house, her blouse hanging off one shoulder, his hands gripping her waist. She whispered, "He's so clueless," while they kissed fiercely, her face contorting in arrogant glee. Luke's replies were drowned out by the rustle of clothes, but I caught him saying, "As soon as he slips up, we'll bury him. Then you and I can live freely." Grace laughed, hooking her leg around his hip. The cameras caught enough to confirm their lustful entanglement without descending into explicit detail, enough to sicken me at how comfortable, how practiced they seemed. I remembered how that moment fueled my determination to drag them through the mud. Saturday arrived, and a wave of Grace's relatives showed up, proclaiming their shock. They marched into my living room. One cousin snapped, "Ed, is it all true?" Grace's name is being dragged through the gutter. "Did you have to make it so public?" I shrugged. She forced my hand. She wasn't exactly subtle, was she? Grace's aunt scowled. "You're punishing her, humiliating her. You could have ended the marriage quietly." My teenage son, Eric, cut in. "She humiliated us first. She lied about my sister's father. She tried to destroy Dad's reputation. She messed everything up. Don't ask Dad to be gentle on her now." That stunned them into silence. They shuffled off soon after. I stood there, swirling a glass of water, feeling a darker sense of triumph. Even Grace's extended family had no defense for her anymore. On a random Friday night, Grace and Luke tried to eat dinner at Charlie's again. The entire place cleared out around them. People stared, whispered, pointed. The waitress bluntly informed them, "We had a bunch of folks waiting for seats, but when they saw you two, they said they'd eat elsewhere. They've seen the footage. They read Ed's letter." Infuriated, Grace threw cash on the table and stormed out. Luke trailing at the door, they ran into her parents, who were waiting for a table themselves. Grace attempted a greeting. "Mom, Dad, Her father shot Luke a murderous glare. "Mr. Barrow, get out of my sight. You've ruined our daughter." Although she didn't need much help, Grace's mother turned away, refusing even to look at her. "You're not welcome with us," was all she said. Humiliated, Grace stumbled outside, tears streaming. Luke placed a hand on her shoulder. She shoved it away. "Don't touch me," she growled, crumbling into sobs in the parking lot. Time passed. Grace kept calling the kids. Amy blocked her. Eric hung up. April stayed silent. Luke fought to keep his federal job in St. Louis as the county demanded he repay tens of thousands. They gave up their luxury cars, rented a cramped 2-bedroom, and braced for the fraud trial. If I won, Missouri law would leave them just $10,000 each. One day, April came to me, stoic since her grandmother's death. "Dad, we need a meeting. I want them to see the inheritance is untouchable and face the damage they caused." Dale arranged it. A glass-walled room, sunlit Grace in a cheap suit, Luke worn out, their lawyers tense. April sat beside me calm. "I know about your father," she told Luke. "Grandma told me you pressured Mom. I was just a problem to you." Grace tried to speak. "April, that's not—" April cut in. "Stop. You lied to me, to Dad, for your future with Luke." Dale slid an envelope over, Beatrice's will. Everything went to April. Once she learned the truth about Grace's years of deception, she changed it. April faced Luke. "You both lose. You're nothing to me," Grace whispered. "We can fix this." April's stare was sharp. "There's nothing to fix." Luke's jaw twitched, my heart pounded. This was the final act. Flawless. Grace and Luke both went broke, crushed by legal fees and forced restitution for their fraud. Their public reputations lay in tatters, and they faced an onslaught of civil charges initiated by my attorney, Dale. Grace tried calling our children, Amy, Eric, and April, but they all rejected her outright. Even her own extended family shunned her, blaming her arrogance and deceit for this downfall. Meanwhile, I received overwhelming community support. The local paper published my open letter to Grace, fueling sympathy for my plight and condemnation of theirs. April's final words to Luke were simple: "You're nothing." We moved on, stronger,